morning, good afternoon, good evening. There's a report saying that the DA, the opposition party in South Africa, who are in coalition with ANC following the 29th May election, are now pushing that SADC should move the upcoming SADC meeting scheduled to happen in Harare in 2 weeks' time from Harare. And they are citing the human rights abuses in Zimbabwe. This is a bombshell. This is the last thing one would have expected to happen if ANC had won in the May 29th South Africa elections. As it so happened, ANC lost its majority. And so, although it won most of the seats, it has been compelled to go into a coalition. And one of their coalition partners is the DA, and they are now flexing their muscles. Until 29th of May, ANC had arrogantly propped up Zanu PF. In their November 2022 Congress, ANC came up with a resolution saying that they will not allow regime change in Zimbabwe. The sheer arrogance of that is unbelievable. Is Zimbabwe a province of South Africa? Clearly, they were treating it as it is a province of South Africa. The only reason why, of course, the ANC was propping up Zanu PF was that they did not want to see a sister liberation movement political party removed from office. They were fearing that the same could happen in South Africa if that was to happen in Zimbabwe. And that is exactly what happened on the 29th of May. South Africa, for the first time in 30 years since the end of apartheid, lost its absolute majority. And at the time, some of us said this is a game changer. And already we are seeing that the game has truly changed. Just the call alone for the move for the SADC Summit to be moved from Harare is sending a shockwave. Who would have guessed that ANC that had propped up Zanu PF for all these, for the last 2 decades at least, would be behind such a move? And yet that is what is happening. Here is a short video clip of the ANC Secretary General being humbled soon after the 29th May elections.
Our international relationship is going to really be based off what is good for South Africa, and ensure that this countries respect the rule of law. We will not be associated with dictators and with countries that actually does not respect the human rights of their own countries. Not that we will interfere directly in their affairs, but we will make it really very clear. Like I can give an example that I always use. It's Zanu PF in Zimbabwe. I mean, it's going to be almost impossible, not difficult for Asian SA to have relationships with Zanu PF. Looking at their history, making Zimbabweans to be all over the world, including being here in South Africa, creating a massive challenge for us in South Africa. Zimbabwean people deserve to be in their own country. Got a beautiful country, lots of potential, but unfortunately when you have a party like the Zanu PF, which are friends of the ANC, I really find it difficult for a current government to be associated with the Zanu PF. I mean, it's beyond imagination.
The gentleman sitting on the left-hand side of that picture was none other than the ANC Secretary General, who had announced after the party's November 2022 Congress that ANC would not allow regime change in South Africa. As we can see there, he was like a cat sitting on hot bricks, and rightly so too. It is important that the Zanu PF upholds fundamental rights of the people of Zimbabwe. Zanu PF rigged last year's elections. That point cannot be denied. SADC on election observers condemned those elections. The continental body, AU, on election observers condemned those elections. But there's no doubt that SADC did not deny Zanu PF political legitimacy because of ANC's influence. Now the game has changed. This is another South African piling up the pressure on the need for South Africa to change its foreign policy with Zimbabwe post ANC's losing power in South Africa.
Negotiable. My fellow South Africans, we have a crisis taking place across our border. For years, our government has watched while Zanu PF destroyed a country once capable of feeding much of Southern Africa. This crisis impacts our country deeply, and it is now time for a new approach. It is time for hard diplomacy. We must adopt the strongest and harshest policies against an oppressive government and not punish the people of Zimbabwe. This should start by freezing the assets of Zanu PF leaders in South Africa and banning them from entering our country until there's real reform in that beloved country.
Well, we are seeing changes now. I believe this call, even if the summit is not moved, is a game changer, because it has sent a clear message to Zanu PF that the arrogance of the past, the blatant human rights of the past, will not be allowed anymore. Zanu PF, I believe, will rig the coming 2028 elections. And I'm sure their political sidekick, MDC-CCC, will mobilize their supporters to participate in the flawed elections. Even if that was to happen, I think what we are seeing here is a clear message that SADC will not turn a blind eye to another rigged election in Zimbabwe. If this summit was moved, my prediction would be Mnangagwa will be stripped of the chairmanship of SADC. I think he knows it too. If the SADC summit, which is supposed to happen in Zimbabwe in about 2 weeks' time, is moved to another SADC country, I think SADC will ask that country's president to assume the chairmanship of SADC. And that will be humiliating for Mnangagwa. But I repeat, even if it's not moved, the very fact that an issue like this has been put on the table and citing human rights abuses in Zimbabwe has forced Mnangagwa to more than just eat humble pie. I think he has been fatally wounded. The arrogance of rigged elections and getting away with it is over. Here is Mnangagwa addressing his supporters recently on the issue of the rigged elections of last year.
Zanu PF kana ndonyanyisa kufara zvakanaka ukavona vavengi vakwashi kurumbidzwa nekuchikanganisa ukavona vachiti Zanu PF yakaipa farai because you are doing correct things for your country. Hongu takaita maelections edu kuna vamwe vaitaura zvisina musoro zvikanzi maelections anofamba zvakanaka ndezvavo.
Well, SADC also said the elections did not go down well. And so did the AU. And this issue of saying Zanu PF does not care what anybody else said about the 2023 elections is nonsense. As much as SADC cannot revisit the 2023 elections, the very decision that the summit should be moved, it's a clear sign that there are some SADC leaders out there who are not happy with Zanu PF's arrogance, with Zanu PF's repeated tyrannical rule. Every Zimbabwean has the right to a meaningful say in the governance of the country. That should be paramount. That should not be an issue for discussion. For a regime to blatantly rig the elections and keep poking its finger in the people's eyes, claiming that the elections were free, fair, and credible, is totally unacceptable. And I, for one, would really like to see the summit moved from Harare and Mnangagwa stripped of the chairman of SADC. That should send a clear message that Zanu PF, with his sidekick, may go ahead with 2028 elections, but the regime should understand that getting away with it this time would not be easy at all. And that's as it should be. The game has changed, Mnangagwa. This is a totally different ball game. ANC is no longer there to prop you up. And the message could not be any louder than it is now. The writing is on the wall. The days of rigged elections and getting away with it are over. In Zimbabwe, we want free, fair, and credible elections. That is not negotiable. And the pressure should continue to be mounted. And I think as much as Mnangagwa would want to pretend that he doesn't care, the truth of the matter is the game is over. We are not going back to the days of rigged elections and regimes getting away with it. Thank you very much for joining me today, and have a good afternoon.